Hello and welcome to this special series of dialogue, Deeper Reforms, Better Opportunities. The third plenary session of the 20th CPC Central Committee has adopted a resolution on further deepening reform comprehensively to advance Chinese modernization. It says, quote, by 2035, we will have finished building a high-standard socialist market economy in all respects, further improved the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics, generally modernized our system and capacity for governance, and basically realized socialist modernization. With that in mind, what policies will be implemented to achieve these reform goals over the next 10 years? What are the priorities of China's reform agenda, and what does the resolution mean for the Chinese economy? Join us for our discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Well, joining me today are Andy Mok, Senior Research Fellow with the Center for China and Globalization, John Ross, Senior Fellow with the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China, and Professor Liu Baocheng from the University of International Business and Economics. So welcome to Dialogue. Baocheng, I will start with you. Yes. So the resolution is out, also called communique. It's not that detailed information, I would say, but it does provide guidelines and also this basically, which direction the country will go for the next 10 years. So what's your take?
Well, it is the job of such resolution to set the direction and reassure the trajectory is right to achieve the Chinese new modernization, because modernization has been there since the founding of the People's Republic. Generations of Chinese leadership has been talking about modernization, but this round of modernization under the new era is there. We will make more complex the strival ways, for example, to deal with the harmonization of environment versus our economic growth, and also to address the rule of law, and then to aim at the total quality of the people's livelihood through democracy and through also the fairness in the distribution of the social outcome. And so all of these efforts are there to point out that we are very firm and we are very coherent in implementing the reform and opening to the outside world, and in which the more demanding is on the capacity building for the Chinese governance, because we face more complexities and more variables to deal with. So with the increase of the governance capacity, we are able to optimize many of those decisions so that we can give more confidence to multiple stakeholders, be it business community at home and abroad, and also for all the workers in terms of their job understanding, and also the many other global partners.
So you are basically saying that you do see this pragmatism and also probably say consistency in terms of the Chinese policy making.
Absolutely.
In long-term direction. Andy, a similar question to you. What do you see as the highlights or most important signals out of this conference?
Well, Qingduo, I think the headline message, of course, is deepening reform comprehensively to advance Chinese modernization. So if we look at this in context, this is the third plenum of the new era. So I think, as Baocheng pointed out, what's very important here is the direction, and the direction has not changed. I think this is vitally important to emphasize, because great endeavors do not happen overnight. As the saying goes, Rome was not built in a day. So I think this is the first point, that this is a continuation of a policy direction. The second point is this is Chinese modernization, meaning that it is not seeking to copy or emulate another model, which often does not work. And we've seen in recent historical experience where countries try to copy the so-called Western model, that often fails. So this is about Chinese modernization, which is about delivering a better life for people, the people of China. And this means economics is at the core, of course, but it is not just about economics. It's also about, as Bao Cheng mentioned, it's about fairness, it's about inclusion, and I think as we'll probably get into as well, it's about efficiency as well. So to me, this is the high-level message. It is a continuation, of course, with adaptations and responses to recent developments, including not just what's called a complex geopolitical situation, but to break that down a little bit, this is outright military conflicts in places like Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Gaza, but also, as we saw with the recent attempted assassination of Donald Trump, that there's the potential for enormous global chaos. And I think China has shown it has the ability to implement ambitious strategies that are also resilient and able to absorb and respond effectively to these kinds of potentially very dramatic changes in the external environment.
Well, John, if you take a close look at this resolution, of course, as its headline indicates, it's about a reform. It mentioned the reforms or reforms like more than 50 times. And development or growth, I think 44, 43 times. So, based on that, the message seems to be clear. That is really about reforming the systems, and then for the purpose of growth, of economic growth there, or social, of course, social factors too. So, do you see that way of the session, of the resolution?
Yeah, I noticed also. So I noticed several times the expression of liberating the productive forces, for example, is another key thing in that. Well, what struck me particularly was the number of times also that the word high appears. We have high level, high quality, etc. And I think this is the overall context of the document, because the key thing, seen from from an international perspective, obviously from my point of view, is China is making the transition not merely from moderate prosperity by its national standards, but to be in a high-income economy by international standards, by World Bank standards. This will occur 2 years, 3 years, depends a little bit on the movement in the exchange rate, but it will do that. But and by 2035, China will be well within the ranks of high-income economies. But it's important to understand what an incredible transformation this is. I mean, there are more people in China than all the existing high-level income economies in the world put together. So there's never been anything like this on the scale of human history. And this, for me, is the key thing, which is the development of reform in which the problems of were at the beginning, which was, low income, etc., are overcome. And you have a very, very much more complicated economy, where the expectations of people are much higher, the demands of people are much higher, the technology that's required is much higher, because China's gone from a situation, if we go back to 1978, it's difficult to think of an industry in which China was the technological leader, whereas now China is certainly the leader in world telecommunications, green energy, drones, and other things. So for me, high is a key word in this. This is a reform taking place in the period of transition of China to a high-income economy.
Now, let me add one point.
Go ahead.
Well, this resolution particularly mentioned about the reform to be driven by the Chinese opening. So I think the embedded message is that we are not only reform domestically, but we are benchmarking the high-end global norms in which China embraces the multilateralism and engage in more of the regional economic and trade treaties. And we also are there contributing to push the WTO reform. And then in the meanwhile, we need to consolidate our domestic market, in which we are also here to remove some of the hidden barriers between different regions. Then we are also going forward for further opening by, further setting up the Hainan free port and enlarge also the coordinate better with the different special economic zones, the free trade zones and high-tech zones, etc. So this way, we are able to remove some of the barriers, not only at the border end in terms of tariff and customs entry, but also the barriers in our backyard that is there to block the free flow and free meeting of those economic resources. So this is there to push the Chinese reform, and this gave the target as where the reform should really take place.
Well, Andy, as Bolton has said, and also in the resolution, it described, quote, opening up as a defining feature of Chinese modernization. So this message is unequivocal. That is, opening up will continue, and it's a defining feature of the Chinese modernization. Without this, you won't call it a Chinese modernization. So opening up is a sure theme for the upcoming 5-10 years, and a continuation, I would say.
No, that's absolutely right, Qingduo. So I think opening up, the door is not closing. It's in fact going to open wider, and that's going to present more opportunities for China, Chinese enterprises, the Chinese people, as well as people around the world. And I think what the history of reform in China so far has shown just how beneficial greater openness and integration with the world has been for China and the world. We look at everything from trade, investment, people-to-people relations, tourism, study abroad, foreign students coming to China, et cetera, that clearly I think that this is the core component of reform, as you just mentioned.
Obviously, foreign investors, they care a lot about the market, about the economy, about the continuation of opening up. Right? That means opportunities. Is that the case, Andy?
That absolutely is the case. So for many years, what foreign businesses, especially American businesses, saw in China was this enormous market of 1.4 billion people. But increasingly, I think what American businesses are seeing are partnership opportunities and even opportunities to work with technology leaders. So look at some of the automakers in the United States. They're looking to Chinese partners for electric vehicle technology, batteries, et cetera, and increasingly design as well. So we see that with electric vehicles, China has not only led breakthroughs in key technologies, but also the design and the distribution of electric vehicles all around the world. So absolutely, I think barring any political obstacles, certainly I think many, if not all, American businesses want greater engagement with China.
Well, John, this it's also they are setting the goals for 2029 and 2035. For example, by 2035, quote, we will have finished building a high standard socialist market economy in all respects. So that's the stress of a market economy, or the building of a market economy, let's say a mature market economy probably in 2035.
Yeah, well, certainly that's the goal. If we go back to the discussion that took place at the adoption of the present 5-year plan, it didn't set an official target of doubling per capita GDP by 2035, but it said there were no obstacles to, no fundamentals, which meant therefore it's somewhere between a target, but it indicated that that's realistic. Well, so far it's entirely realistic. It would, between 2020 and 2035, China would have to hit 4.7% annual growth rate during that period to double its GDP per capita. So far it's coming in around 5%, so it's slightly ahead of what it needs to do. But that will take China well into the realms of high income economies. I mean, it will take it won't yet reach, say, the level of, say, West Germany or the United States, but it'll pass the threshold into high income economy to 2-3 years time. By 2035, it'll be somewhere in the middle of might say a middle high income economy, some phrase like that, right? Okay, yeah, and this shows the success of the socialist market economy. I mean, it's been the most successful economic system in history. That's not a question of boasting. This is just a fact. If you look at the economic growth since 1978, there is no major country in history which has ever achieved such rapid growth over such a long period of time. The question was, though, that was taking China from a very underdeveloped state. Now it's no longer an underdeveloped country. Of course, I don't want to exaggerate. There are still areas, of course, in which China is not yet the technological leader. That will take 10, 20 years. The United States will attain technological edge in a number of industries for quite even longer than that. But this is the new thing. China is no longer merely a follower economy. In an increasing number of fields, it's a leader, and no longer in ones which only developing economies. Look at the fact that China is the world's largest now car exporter. Well, that wasn't a situation where the competition came from developing countries. That was where the competition traditionally came from Germany and Japan, yes, which are high-income economies. So this is a whole raising of the level of the economy, and growing it is at the present time round roughly the same rate. That's going to spread out to an increasing number of industries.
Mm-hmm. Baocheng, of course, in the 2029, basically in about 5 years' time, so when China marks the 80th anniversary of the founding of the Republic, so reforming tasks, according to the resolution, will be realized. So next 5 years will be full of all kinds of reforming measures, policies to really to be implemented, and I mean to achieve that goal. So reform is still the key thing to talk about, to focus.
Well, these are really very ambitious but very realistic programs. And this needs to be put in institutional framework, and so that everyone can really have the alignment in terms of their expectation and also in terms of direction where they make their efforts towards. So in addition to that, we need really to have more a rule of the law, because if we say that the past years was more of a policy-driven, either reform and opening, now it must be rest on a law, because the policy can really shift the here and there. Even though they do not really miss the direction, they may deviate some of the tracks. And some, actually this resolution particularly mentioned about, so all the policies, all the laws should really point to one direction instead of being ambivalent with each other. So all the ministries will have to be better coordinated under this general guideline, but more as in setting up more of the law that is more predictable, and so that more of the confidence both at the community and also at the business and consumers, they all have the confidence. And one thing that's particular is that this resolution emphasizes on equal access to resources, on equal treatment, which means that we are not really
between the public sector and the
between
non-public
public sector
economies.
and between all market players, be it state-owned ones, be it Chinese private
venture
ones, or foreign invested companies, joint venture or wholly owned. So they all need to have the same level playing fields. This is really made particularly very articulate in that regard. I didn't really see many other documents in previously that points to this direction. It's normally say, oh, we need to provide equal leveling playing field, but not as so specific, because after all, this document is really to set the direction. But now it made so clear on this particular point. I think that has a huge implication to give confidence to all businesses, particularly the private sector and also the foreign investments.
You mentioned about the confidence, of course. A lot of people agree with you. One of the challenges right now for the Chinese economy is people say the lack of confidence, rather, in the private sector in particular. As you said, indeed, in the language is very clear that China will unswervingly consolidate and grow this public sector economy. Basically, similar language is used to encourage, support, and guide the non-public sector to grow, and also they mentioned basically in the Chinese language 3 times the word, literally meaning equally or equality, will be protected under the law equally, and will be dealt with similarly in access to resources and participating in market competition. So this is, in this sense, this is critically important at this time to send out such a message to the private sector, to the foreign investors in particular, or this non-public sector here.
Well, the 2 unequivocals are really the leading principles. So that was really not very new. But now, with more of the articulation in terms of the equal access to resources and equal treatment, and also supported by the rule of law, is there to be given to those all market players. So that's something of a high assurance. And because we do notice that many of those the business communities, be it Chinese private firms or foreign investors, they have been watching very intensely over what can be delivered over this plenum, because there has been a lot of rumors that whether we are backtracking on our policy and whether we are going to further tighten the China's control under the name of national security, etc. So now I think it does really send a very positive and inspiring message to the business community. So I do hope, and I do believe also, that more of the implementation, both at the legislation level and also at the policy level, can quickly follow up, so that more of those specifics can be delivered on the enforcement level and implementation level.
Yes, of course. Andy, basically Chinese President Xi Jinping, he himself, personally, in his remarks, he talked about emancipating the mind, liberating and developing social productive forces, and unleashing and enhancing social vitality. These are, of course, in line with this the reforming spirit we are talking about. And in this communique, it talked about the role of market. For example, it says, in building a high standard socialist market economy, the role of the market must be better leveraged, and with a fairer and more dynamic market environment to be fostered, and the resource allocation to be made as efficient and productive as possible. What do you make of that?
Yes, I think that this is very important, but it's, I think, vital to point out a very subtle distinction here. So a socialist market economy requires an effective market, but it does not mean that the government or the people serve the market, that the relationship is actually the other way around. So that the market needs to be empowered, but also appropriate rules and constraints need to be implemented where necessary, so that even the most free market of economists recognize there are market failures. And in most Western societies, there are not very good solutions to this. They're more band-aids, I would say, that addressing the key issue, which is the relationship between the market and society. So I think this is one point. And I'd like to go back to an earlier point about reform, which is part of, I think, involves markets as well, is that institutional reform and bureaucratic reform is very important as well. And I think this was emphasized in the communique. And this is, I think, an area that while China has made enormous progress, I think the government, the party, recognizes that more progress can be made. And it's not just about growing the pie, about distribution, but also efficiency as well. And I think when we see greater efficiency, this builds confidence as well amongst the private sector in China as well as the foreign business community. And I think this will make it a much more positive environment going forward.
Right, John. You see, President Xi Jinping, he personally basically dealt with or deal with rather these reforming tasks, sometimes priorities. On one hand, you want to efficiency, for example, effectiveness in terms of growing the economy. On the other hand, one of the key or themes of his idea, usually people would say, is fairness. He sees that as important. To narrow the gap, for example, between rich and poor, for the people to be truly benefiting from this economic expansion. How do you see, his vision evolved over the past years to deal with evolving economic and geopolitical environments?
Well, I don't think there's any change in the fundamental ideas, and I've been reading his books on the governance of China as they're produced, as well as the speeches. So I don't think there's any fundamental change in ideas, but of course the situation becomes more concrete. The key fundamental thing is that the people should benefit from the economic growth. Economic growth is not the goal. Economic growth is just the means to achieve it. It's a very important means. If without it you can't do anything, because you can't distribute what you don't produce. Right, but that's the key thing. And this is the difference, for example, to the situation in the West. If you look at the statistics, the US economy has not been growing terribly fast, let's say, in the last 15 years, but it's been chugging out about 2% a year. But the income of the population hasn't gone up at all. Literally, real wages are staying around the same level. In other words, the benefits of the economic growth are going to a small section of the population who's got very well off, billionaires, fantastic time to be a billionaire in the United States, particularly during COVID, incidentally, incredible increase in billionaire wealth during COVID, while hundreds of thousands of people were dying. And under those circumstances, of course, you get great social tension. As you can see in the United States, if the economy is growing, some people are doing fantastically well and other people are not gaining at all, then you will get a lot of social tension. The key thing which Xi Jinping's orientated to, as far as I see it, is making sure that the benefits of the growth reach the people. And then also, incidentally, very important is to make sure it's not environmentally damaging as well, because now you've got to look after the people in the long-term sense, not merely in the short-term sense. So that's what's the goal of the socialist market economy. And I think that was Xi Jinping's fundamental idea and continues to be Xi Jinping's fundamental idea, as far as I understand them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Baocheng, of course, a couple of days ago, the Chinese government published the numbers, the GDP growth for the first half of this year, for example, 5%. And for actually the second quarter, less than 5%.
Yeah, dipped, yes.
And a bit, slowing down a little bit there.
Yeah.
So, the goal for this whole entire 5%, what are some of the challenges probably ahead of us we need to overcome in order to achieve that kind of goal?
Well, we actually in our last book, which I think you have also read, that one key message is that past dependence will cause diminishing return, which means that we need to reinvent the Chinese strategy, and hence the resolution points out the new productive forces. And so by bringing up more of the innovation, through scientific research, and also by giving more the capacity building opportunities for those operational workers and also supervisors. So this does really offer a great deal, to elevate the Chinese productive force. And the other, as John has mentioned, is about the institutional changes, which means the Chinese bureaucracy, I think, they also need to streamline. One is that they need to raise their operational capability. The other is some of the organizations need to be downsized.
Again, reforms.
That's the reform. And then, different ministries, different localities need better coordination, so that they won't really deviate, from the main direction set forth by the resolution.
Thank you, Baocheng, and many thanks to our guests. This is the end of today's discussion. You can also follow us on the CGT app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.